Record. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the CI Signal team for Cluster API 1.10 release. This is a CNCF meeting. We are abiding by the CNCF code of conduct. Please use the raise hand button to, if you'd like to speak, and please be nice to each other, and so on. I was just going to say, I'm going to upload this when it's done so that you can watch it. But if you're here, you're already in the meeting. And if you're not here, you've already found where I uploaded it. So I guess that's not very helpful information. So that's fun. Let's see. We've got some folks here. If you'd like to add your name to the attending list, please do so. Otherwise, let's go over our robust agenda for today, where I see nothing. We have nothing. I'm going to add one discussion topic, Chris. We agreed before the meeting to have a couple small guided troubleshooting pairing sessions on Thursday and Friday of this week. Chris, out next week. Oh, here's a thing we can talk. Do we just want to skip the meeting next week, or do one of you want to lead it and then YouTube it and all that? I'm okay with us skipping. I have no problem with that.
Skip. You're not there. We don't want to be there. Come on now. We come here to see
All
you.
right. Yeah. Oh, well, I'm just making sure nobody disagrees.
Yeah, no, I think we're
All
good.
right.
I think we can keep in touch
Yeah.
async, so it's fine.
We will not do a meeting next week, which is March. What is that? March 5th. All right. And that's fine. That's going to be fine. Definitely keep in contact with Slack. I will still have Slack where I'm at. I'm just not going to be dedicating much time to Cappy work unless there's like an emergency or something because um I'm on vacation and I'm gonna make use of my vacation. All right. So anyway, and okay. Anything else that people would like to bring up? Otherwise, I'm gonna do a quick pseudo tasting of a check on all the test statuses.
I don't have anything.
Okay. And no one else has mentioned anything. All right. So um one of the things people asked before the meeting was kind of getting an idea of how I walk through triage to see if anything new is up here. So I want to give you like the quick version. There are two pages that I look at for doing triage of the end-to-end tests. There's this aggregated failures portal that we have. This is linked in a few different places in the documentation. Um, Important things to know about this page is these fields being filled in help to narrow it down to just the jobs that we care about. And this field helps remove all the provider jobs that are not our responsibility in any way, shape, or form to debug and troubleshoot. That's the people who write the providers. So that's what's going on this page. And then it gives you a bunch of output that's very intimidating graphs that look like they're written in 1995. But they do have useful details and they'll tell you like, hey, I found 6 failures on this job, none today, which is what I like to see, none today, because that means either it's fixed or it's not happening frequently enough for me to care about. Um, I will tell you, as I look through this, I'm seeing this one about should adopt up-to-date control plane machines without modification. The KCP adoption test is a known issue. So I can tell you right now, this is going into an issue that's already logged, and so I don't need to open a new ticket for this one. I had to learn that by looking at the open tickets and talking to other people and being like, "Is this the same thing or not?" And they told me it's the same thing, and now I'm at the point where I could dig into the error logs and be like, "Yeah, it's the same thing," which I've done on previous days. So that's what gives me the confidence to be able to look at this little sheet and be like, "Oh yeah, we've this one's known." So I'm gonna move down. Another one, none today. It looks like there was a uh, unit test that was failing. I believe it's been fixed for about a week now. So we scroll on by that one. We got this one that's got 4 failures where it can't pull an image. but hasn't failed. Okay, again, this is from the 17th. This is one we that I opened with the guys and they fixed. So that one's fine. Another one, nothing since the 20th. Another unit testy thing. Blah 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 blah. Pretty much not seeing anything from today, which is good news. And I guess the only thing I would look at is like this is a unit test that I'm not used to failing, but it's from 2 days ago. So for me, this outlier that happened once and hasn't happened again, this goes on my list of I care about this if it happens again. But right now I'm just going to assume it was some bad code that got fixed. And that might be a false assumption, but that's my quick triage at work. So this I'm just showing you a quick triage. And all right, so this list is really long. So anyway, anything that failed today would be at the top of this list. Nothing failed today, so that's good enough for now. Um, like I said, I'm showing you how I do a quick triage. The other thing I look at is the test grid um, output. And so there are 4 pages here on the test grid. We've got cluster API, we've got the 1.7 branch, the 1.8 branch, the 1.9 branch. Those are the 4 little subsections we care about in this page. And then we care about the tests that don't say PR in them. Because PR tests run against people's new code commits. And so those are expected to fail sometimes because people commit bad code and that needs to be fixed before the PR is merged. All right. So looking at the main cluster API, I see this CAPI end-to-end flaky warning, and this is from the let's see, 25th. So this is from yesterday, and it found unexpected running containers. So um, this one means something that it was trying to bring down as part of the test cleanup didn't get brought down. That could be something we care about. Generally, I'm going to say I don't know that it really is, but again, this is one of those that's like, well, it's after all the tests are done, all the tests passed, it just didn't clean up a node correctly. That could be problematic and mean we're missing some test coverage somewhere, or this is just sometimes things fail when you're dealing with the prow machines and kind. So this is like some of those other tests. This one just goes in the back pocket of, does this start happening regularly or is this a one-off? All right. And that was the only flaky test I saw on the main branch. So then I go to 1.7, which is like all greens, which yay, good. Then I go to 1.8, and we have one up here in CAPI end-to-end minimum K8s version release test, or release 1.8 test. So this is testing the 1.8 branch against the minimum K8s version that it supports. And we see when following the cluster API quick start, it should create a workload cluster. And yes, that does sound like something it should do. And we got a bunch of things in here like server was enabled. All right. So something was going on with this thing trying to start a node, it looks like. This I cannot debug quickly. This does not follow into anything that I'm aware of that I can remember in my memory. So this is certainly something that might be worth looking into. Um, that's all I can say about it from here, but this I would flag to deep dive into later and see if we can figure out what's going on. What I imagine would happen. Oh, we got a raised hand. Hello, Sapida. What do you got?
So I guess one issue I have is maybe I don't know cluster API enough to even like when I see an error,
Yeah,
like the error message itself makes sense, but I'm like, I have no clue like the flow of things and
yeah.
well,
That
okay, you
and
have to
that
go.
okay.
Mhm,
That's fine. So let me cut you off there and be like the proper thing to do then is if you don't have the skills to properly debug it, and sorry, that sounds condescending, but I mean, if you just aren't familiar enough with the code paths
mhm,
to properly debug it, that's a better way to put it. Um, it's okay to just post in the Slack like, "Hey, this is failing. Um, here are the error messages I found. Does anyone able to show me like how to validate that this is a real failure and what's
mhm,
causing it?" And then I can contribute and be like, I'll take a look and maybe end up being like, yeah, I agree. I also don't understand it. Can somebody else
mhm,
let us know? And
mhm,
then we get the maintainers involved. They look at it and they're like, oh yeah. And this has happened to me multiple times already. They
mhm,
spend 5 minutes on it and they're like, oh yeah, I've got to race condition here on the cluster delete.
Mm-hmm.
We should have fixed that.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a PR. And you're like, oh, okay. I'm glad you were able to understand that quickly.
Okay, so my
But
next question
opening
is,
an issue is okay. You don't have to debug everything. And
okay.
especially if you're new to cluster API, you're not going to be able to. So just opening an issue, or before opening an issue, if that's too intimidating, just post it in the release
Mm-hmm.
channel on Slack and be
Ask.
like, "Hey, let's talk about this one."
Yeah, okay. Fair enough. I guess my next question is, do you or anybody on this call um ever does anything to get familiar with Cluster API itself? Like, because I don't use it on a day-to-day basis. I haven't gone through the whole documentation. Like, I have done a few small like checks here and there, but I haven't really used it. I just want to know if working with it would be more helpful to actually troubleshoot it as well.
If you're trying to debug the really hard tests, knowing the path that the code goes through is helpful.
Mm-hmm.
If you're just trying to understand the tests, the end-to-end tests at all, I would say using Cluster API isn't that helpful because the end-to-end test framework is its own monster on its own.
Yeah.
And yes, obviously, because we're testing Cluster API, knowing how it works is helpful.
Yeah.
But in I would say learning and figuring out how to fix this end to end is its own challenge in addition to learning and understanding Cluster API, if that makes
Understood.
sense.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not saying you can do one without the other, but I'm saying it's kind of separate skills and they're both difficult in their own ways. And
Understood.
it's like the worst possible answer I can give because it's like, well, that's depressing because now I have to put a bunch of time into this and a bunch of time into this. And it's like, yes.
But that's the only way to learn it. So I guess it's a fair
And
answer. Thank you.
and yeah, and it's something I've never liked about the end-to-end test suite. It's just very complicated. And I've been my first me learning this end-to-end test suite has been a journey that's taken multiple years.
No, totally fair. I mean, it's huge, and I guess th there's no
Maybe it
easy way
shouldn't, but
around it.
that's what it is for me. And but I was also learning Go in the process, so I had other challenges that I at the same time, right?
Hmm.
So I'm sure other people didn't do it faster than me, but like I cannot give you any good news about shortcuts to get you ready to debug these tests because it's just it's just it's like you're troubleshooting a giant bash script written in Go, right?
Oh,
It's
yep.
and you have to understand the flow. It's not just
Hmm.
a matter of looking for an error with a variable somewhere. It's like this is not somebody put a plus sign where there should be a minus sign. This is are they
Yeah.
calling things in the right order? Will this cause a race condition type stuff? And oh sorry, that would be debugging the CAPI part of it. And then the end-to-end test is like this calls this, which calls this, which calls this, which calls this, which gets config from over here, which might also be overridden with these environment variables from over here. And getting all that in your head is hard.
Hmm. Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think again, it's a matter of investing the time and doing it
Yeah.
multiple times until it feels more, I guess, well,
What I am
less
gonna say,
intimidating.
what I am gonna say is if I had to choose between learning the end-to-end test suite and Cluster API first, I would still just learn Cluster API first. I don't think starting with the end-to-end is really the best place to start.
Hmm.
Um, so I would to get back to your original question of how to practice Cluster API, and I am interested in hearing from Eddie. Oh, Sir Rum had to leave. Um, for me, it was doing the quick start a lot in the main Cluster API book. Um,
Hmm. Yeah.
you're familiar with that page, I
Yes. Yeah.
assume, right? The quick start. Um, you could also mess around with the operator, but that hasn't come up much as far as I can see in these tests. So I think just
Hmm.
the quick start is a good one. And then you could also try. So this will bring you through doing everything locally on your machine with Kind.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you can also, if you have access to credits or whatnot on any of these providers,
Hmm.
after you've done the quick start locally in your computer, I would encourage you to use one of these providers,
Hmm.
assuming you have access to them, which
Mm.
usually involves money, but I know people work at places and they have access and they can use it for educational things. So if you have that as an option, take advantage of it because you'll see differences between using Cluster API on the quick start on in Docker versus using it with a cloud provider. Um,
Mhm.
Not big differences, but you'll notice some differences. Like there are things that haven't been implemented in the provider or whatnot. And actually, now that I say that, I think if you just do quick start on most providers, the most difficulty you're going to have is figuring out where to set the secrets so that it can access that provider and make machines.
Hmm.
And so that will probably be the extent of what you get out of doing quick start and then quick start with a provider. Um, but then you will have made a cluster and you can practice how to connect to that cluster and moving the cluster. And that's the beginning of using Cluster API. And then you can
Hmm.
start branching out into other things after that. The development workflow, which is, if you've seen me talk about tilt, after
Yeah.
you've done quick starts, then work on the development guide, like figuring out how to stand up the tilt thing and make it
Hmm.
work. Just getting that up and running is, you got to get used to that too. And so get that working, maybe get it working against a provider. You don't have to do that. We're the upstream. Um,
Hmm.
and then you can actually be at the point where you've got it running in Tilt and you can edit code in VS Code and save the file, and Tilt will redeploy a component based on code that you wrote. So you can try to
Hmm.
figure out how that works. That'd be the next step. And then after you've figured out how to do development workflows, that's when I would jump into working on the end-to-end tests
Hmm.
personally. But like I said, there's separate skill sets at the beginning. So like all the things you learned here in Cluster API is not going to apply until you get deeper into the end-to-end test, because you have to learn how they work first and how they're
Hmm.
called before you get to the point where they're actually doing tests and you can figure out how to fix those. Um, and I think all of that is out of scope really for the CI team's base responsibility, which is look for flakes and make sure the developers know about them.
Hmm.
Yes, I know the documentation really emphasizes if we can fix the flakes or come up with a PR, please do so, because obviously that's going to be helpful if we don't need the maintainers to be distracted and we can just give them a PR to review. But they understand. We've got a bunch of new people. Most every release cycle, we've got a bunch of new people. So just submitting the error and telling them about it is good enough.
Understood. Yeah, I guess other than like bringing up Cluster API itself, I think I need to understand like different components of it, like the
Yes.
machine stateful. I don't know, like KCP might not be a Cluster API specific thing. I don't know,
No, no.
but
Casey, yeah, the basics would be doing a cluster
hmm.
and that with a machine pool, or excuse me, no, with a machine deployment
Hmm.
and KCP.
Hmm.
Those are your basic components. The KCP is deploying your control plane nodes. The machine deployment is deploying your
Hmm.
worker nodes,
Hmm.
and then you've got a cluster. There are other features. You've got cluster classes, machine pools, and all this other stuff. They're
Yeah.
relatively new. They
Hmm.
do come up in the tests, but they're not part of, at least what I would say is traditionally, the core basic quick start of Cluster API.
Understood. Okay.
And
But
it's
yeah, I mean, I
hard to
guess
know which is which because they talk
yeah.
about cluster class a lot during the meetings right now because they're working on it and making it better.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough.
Cluster class is basically just a template for clusters. And before they had cluster class, you didn't have a you had templates. They were little text files for clusters. They weren't objects in the cluster that you could
Oh.
say make a cluster that's like this class.
Hmm.
You just said make a cluster and here's the full YAML that describes it.
Hmm.
You still get that YAML at the end of the day with cluster cuddle. It still references the cluster class object, figures out what a cluster of that type of class would look like, and then spits it into a YAML file that you apply. So it's you can skip the whole cluster class thing for now. Is I
Hmm.
guess the best advice I can give for getting skip cluster class and machine pools. They are important new features, but if as far as like just focusing on the basics, you could skip those for now.
Okay.
If that
Thanks.
helps, I don't know.
Of course. Yeah,
Yeah, that
absolutely.
is
Because
super
this
helpful.
too.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Um, y One of the things I don't know is as they update the quick start, they may make the default template use a cluster class. That's like stuff that's been going on during this release cycle, so I should probably do some quick starts myself to see if cluster classes are being pulled in and you can't avoid them. Yeah, I need to do some research there. So anyway, all right. And then finally, I go through the cluster API 1.9 branch and I see this KCP adoption, which this one I 100% do recognize. And this is an ongoing one. We know it's an issue. And um, the biggest issue with this KCP adoption is getting it to replicate when you have all the debug stuff enabled. Because right now it just happens randomly and we don't know why, and we need better logging and debugging to be able to troubleshoot why. So this is like a giant, many hours, multiple days project for someone to figure out at some point. And that's why this that's the KCP adoption one, and that's why it still happens, just because it's so hard to actually troubleshoot. All right, that's my workflow for basic triage, and then after that I could dig into one of these things that I found during the triage, or I can post in the Slack and be like, should we make an issue for this, or just make the issue for this if I feel confident it's real. And then that's it. That's all I really need to do, and then the maintainers usually go from there. And if I've got lots of time, then I go ahead and dig into it before occupying the maintainers. But I do have lots of time for that in my schedule right now. So, okay, that is an overview of my troubleshooting or my daily triage process. I could tell you this overall, this is a good signal. Like this signal, from my understanding at least, we've got a couple flakes, one of which is really well known, and that's it. And that ain't bad. This looks good. One thing you should do, I that didn't come up in this triage, but I guess I should let you know, if we get like the red X's that are like failed tests, immediately tell people in the Slack. What's good though is most of the time the maintainers have already noticed by the time you notice that there's failed tests. But if they haven't, be that first person. Just say, "Hey, this test is failing," and that'll get people to look at it, whether it's me or them or whatever. That's a good one. And you can feel confident that failed tests you should be reporting because we don't want those at all. You don't have to guess like, is this a flake or not? Like, no, it's failed. It's red. Have somebody tell you it's good. Just assume it's bad.
Okay. Good point. Thanks.
Okay. And with that, let's go back to our meeting notes. Chris did a quick walkthrough of his daily triage process. And that's it. All right, cool. Okay. Anything else anyone wants to talk about?
Not me.
All right, that's everybody. So thanks everybody for joining. I'll see you tomorrow and Friday if you're here, probably for one of our little guided troubleshooting calls. And otherwise, see you in 2 weeks. No meeting next week. No meeting on March 5th because I'm out, and I think instead of trying to coordinate the host key stuff and all that, the feedback is like, how about we just let it go for a week and coordinate on Slack if we need any emergency meetings? And I think that's fine. So we'll see you in 2 weeks. And until then, bye bye, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks.
See
You too.
y'all.
Bye, everyone.